In Kenya and in others in Asia and the Middle East, FGM, we've spoken about this today, is practiced mainly as a rite of passage. The act is seen as part of their culture and identity. The WHO estimates that 120 to 140 million women and girls have been subjected to FGM. Another 91.5 million females over 9 years in Africa are living with the consequences of this heinous act. Those opposed to FGM say the practice has no medical benefit and can cause medical harm and death due to infection, severe bleeding, and damage to various internal and reproductive organs that could make childbirth hazardous. Kenya's penal code outlaws the deliberate infliction of grievous bodily harm on anyone, and the Children Act 2001 prohibits FGM and other harmful practices that negatively affect children under the age of 18. The prohibition of FGM Act 2011 criminalizes the practice in the country in a bid to have the practice abandoned. Kenya also now has an anti-FGM board, a semi-autonomous government agency that coordinates civil society organizations and agencies in the fight against this vice. Now, with all these efforts, the war against FGM is being slowly won. This is also because the communities are being involved in the fight. The members of the community are the drivers of the efforts to slowly eradicate this practice. In the last 2 decades, for instance, the rate of FGM has dramatically declined in this area of Africa, in East Africa, from 71% of the girls under 14 in 1995 to 8% in 2016. And as the world commemorates Zero Tolerance of Female Genital Mutilation Day this week, girls are making changes. The mobile application called iCat, which connects girls affected by FGM to legal and medical assistance, was developed recently by 4 Kenyan girls, all students aged between 16 and 18. The group received a global recognition and has christened themselves as restorers who aim to prevent FGM. It is clear that there is momentum and renewed efforts in elimination of this practice. It will not be easy, but the recent strides are encouraging. The hope is we will see the prevalence of FGM decreasing rapidly over the next 10 to 12 years. That's my memo.
Food for thought, huh?
Thank you, Jamila. Food for thought. Now, my kicker tonight is about some very disturbing reports about Kenyan ambassadors appointed some time back but are yet to take up their postings abroad. The Daily Nation newspaper reported today that several diplomatic postings are running into trouble, with appointees either being rejected by the receiving countries or their presentation of credentials being delayed. The report suggests that at least one appointment, that of former Director of Criminal Investigation Ndegwa Mohoro, has been rejected by Malaysia, the country he had been posted to. It is also well known that 2 other appointees are essentially corruption suspects facing serious graft charges in court. The Sports Ministry duo of former Cabinet Secretary Hassan Wario and Principal Secretary Richard Ekai have both been charged in court for theft of public funds in the Rio Olympics in Brazil back in 2016. Now, despite the charges in court, the appointment of Hassan Wario as Kenyan ambassador to Vienna, Austria, and that of Richard Ekai as ambassador to Russia has never been rescinded. In my view, there are 2 lessons for Kenya out of the foregoing. First, the so-called vetting of appointees for public offices is a disgraceful fraud. And 2, some values such as integrity are universal and can and are catching up with Kenyans. On the latter, receiving countries routinely carry out background checks on diplomats posted to their countries, and many are unlikely to accept credentials from appointees with cases in court, more so cases about integrity. On the vetting front, Parliament and its members should reflect on the national and global embarrassment that decisions can land our country. From the Cabinet to public service and the diplomatic service, parliamentary vetting committees blindly cleared some glaringly questionable appointees, some of them mere nominees of partisan correctness and beneficiaries of political patronage, some of them individuals of grave integrity questions. With 2 ambassadors designate in court for corruption and 1 reportedly rejected by the receiving country, 2 institutions should proceed into deep reflection tonight. 1, the presidency, for the appointments it makes, and the National Assembly for its blind subservience to the executive, and for its ceremonial cattle-dip vetting that has never saved the country from even just one wrong and bad appointment. The two institutions, one fact endures, some values like integrity are universal, and there are no Kenyan shortcuts around that. Good night.
Wow. Let me punch a bit. Even before we could recover from the heartbreaking news of some of our athletes doping, we are now confronted by yet another disgraceful, disappointing scenario in our sports sector. Match fixing. That Harambee Stars and some defenders sold games for some money, cost us losses, is disappointing. But aren't we a country of match fixing? I mean, look, recently we had a sugar issue and some parliamentarians fixed the report. That was match fixing. We didn't talk about it. We've also match fixed variously whenever guys are being employed in the defense forces, in the security agencies, and so on. Unfortunately, we rarely talk about that fixing, but we are now talking about this match fixing. Let's talk about all this fixing so that we can fix our country, because we are fixed as a country.
Fixed. I'll be very brief tonight. Now, these childish spats between Governors Sang and Joho are not taking this country anywhere. Listen, if one has evidence against the other, he knows where the DCI is. The other can as well go to court to sue for defamation or get clarification from Interpol. The others in their respective camps would do well to drop the petty insults. I mean, equating intelligence to the number of teeth or calling each other slay kings. And while at it, can the governors of Nairobi and Kiambu also stop regaling their tales of their heady days smoking bang? One might be tempted to believe they're raising accountability issues. I doubt that that is indeed the case, other than this just being all about political jostling and ego trips. Oh, and while we're at it, can the former vice chair of the ruling party also forward any evidence he has to the respective authorities, rather than try to convince us all that he has had a sudden epiphany about his deputy party leader? And can we be spared of some so-called legal interpretations about who can and cannot vie for the presidency, about who rigged party primaries, while he himself was vice chair and presumably oversighting the very same process? This political duplicity and chicanery is exhausting. There are bigger problems to solve, discuss, debate in this country. And can we in the media also stop giving this shenanigans prominence on our platforms? As they say on social media, I'm tired. That tonight is my take.
Mechoka.
Oh, wow. That should have ended the show, but my angle tonight is about something that came up this week from the governors. It wasn't about spending 109,000 shillings to buy a cancer-free wheelbarrow, because that we have seen before. Neither was it about that hospital gate in Jamila that cost taxpayers 7 million shillings. No, it was not even the 2 million shillings spent in Kirinyaga County to each for some officials to learn how to open Facebook accounts. No, it wasn't about the 21 million shillings spent to buy a fire engine in Bomet County. What came out this week is that governors now want us to agree to abolish their term limits. That is to say, governors want the opportunity to run for office for as long as they want. That should be okay, because after all, the MCAs and the MPs do not have term limits. As a matter of fact, governors are using this very argument to support their quest. The only problem is that governors, like presidents, are very powerful people. They are able to spend millions of shillings to do just about anything, whether it is legal or not, and somehow get away with it. This would include those immense resources perpetually being used to buy voters. That is why the framers of our constitution, in their immense wisdom, saw it fit to impose term limits on these executive positions. Now, term limits are not just a Kenyan thing. This phenomenon started in ancient Athens and ancient Rome. The US had this concept introduced in law in 1947 after Franklin Delano Roosevelt's unprecedented 4 terms in office. It is now widely held that term limits reduce the chances of incumbents using the state's institutions to manipulate elections or erode the power of rival branches of government and political adversaries. No wonder the governors are pushing to abolish term limits for themselves while cutting down the ability of MCAs to impeach them. How clever. With term limits, leaders feel more pressure to deliver results and leave office with a positive legacy, just as President Uhuru Kenyatta and his Big Four agenda. Through term limits, those governors who see themselves as small gods in the counties can finally realize they're actually not indispensable. I hope we can start a similar discussion about term limits for members of parliament, actually. In the meantime, I hope that governors will deny these reports, just like they denied the stories on cancer-free wheelbarrows and 2 million shilling Facebook accounts. Ooh. That's my angle. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.